so continuing on, we will concentrate now on this front section here, the back section, just to cover this small hole that we've made on here, and also this area down on the handle here. So let's get started with the front part. So I'll snap to my front view, and you can see here that we've got this rounded rectangle shape. What I want to do is I could do two things actually. I could either just create the original nozzle, which we have here, and we could essentially just keep it as two separate parts. But what I want to do is create it as one piece. So let's recreate this nozzle. So I'll turn off the nozzle layer and snap to my front view here with select. I'll choose edges, and I'll select this edge loop here. So one of the things that I want to do now is I want to change the shape of this to a circle. And if you remember from the previous tutorial, we did that with this geometry here. So we'll repeat that step now at the front. So again, with this selected, edges must be selected for this to work. I'm going to go and hit my space bar and go to align, verts and faces. Now I've already got mine selected here as circle, but yours may come up as ortho x-axis. If it does so, then just click on this little drop down menu here, and we're going to choose circle. Now you might not be able to see this, but there's a small node on this green circle, and if I roll over it and left click and drag, I will change the radius of my circle. So I want to put it roughly where I need this to be. So I'm just going to choose this position here. And so with my edges selected on here, I can simply hit apply, and it will match those edges to that circle radius that I specified on there. Okay, let's go with that for now. And we can say OK, and then it gives me that circle. So now I'll just drop the selection. So now I'll bring back my reference. So I'll go to my reference here, pull down, pin, edit placement, and then show and hide. And then I will pin that there. Now I can see my profile again. Now if you remember in the very first video, we created this curve here, which gave us our profile, and then we revolved that profile around to give us this shape here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm not going to use that. I'm just going to use an extrusion from this point here. So I will reselect that edge loop there, and I will hit spacebar, transform, make sure I'm in the right axis with my transform gizmo, and now I'll just hit commit extrusion, and I will pull that extrusion out like so. Let's move it over. Again, commit extrusion. Now I will reduce the size, commit extrusion. Okay, so those have all been extruded outwards, and now what I'll do is I will commit another extrusion here and just scale this one in like so, maybe a little bit less, commit another extrusion, and then just extrude that backwards. And we'll just leave it at that for now. So the next thing I'll do on here is just to bevel these edges. If you remember, I'll just hide this one. So if you remember our nozzle that we created, when we did the bevel, we created it using the revolve technique, and as a result of that technique it created quite a few edges on that bevel, which is unnecessary. So with the new one that we've got here, we can simply click on and select these loops here, spacebar, bevel, It's a little bit large, so we can just reduce that down. And I can either just leave it at that, or if I turn off the old variant here, then I can add a segment here. Let's keep it at 2. So I haven't got those multiple segments around there, and I've got a little bit more control over those bevels. So that looks good to me. I'll say OK. And let's just do the front one as well. I forgot to select that one. And say OK. Alright, so that's the front part created. If I wanted to make this look as if it was inside or encased inside of this main section here, then I could easily just create a new edge loop around here. Let's do that now. So I'll go to my split rings tool and let's just split this one here, and I'll select this new selection in here, and I could just hit my transform, commit extrusion, and this time I'm just going to pull these ones back slightly here. And if I just drop that selection there, you can see it's just created that small inset inside. I don't need that extra loop of polys there, so I could just use my delete edge with edge loops selected here and just delete those. And what I'll do is go over to my select edges, select that new bevel edge there, and just bevel that edge as well. I don't need 2 segments. I'll use the old variant on this one. I'll just bring that down. Again, these are details that you're probably not going to be able to see, but if ever there was a close-up, then we've got that geometry in there. So I'll just say OK, and we've completed the new nozzle for our prop. So next, we'll have a look at the back portion of the prop, and I'll turn off the image reference and zoom into this area. So what I'll do now is I will select this loop around here, and if I hit Shift A on the keyboard, it will zoom into that selection. I'm going to just create some basic geometry at the back here. It's not something we're going to be really interested in looking at, so we'll keep it quite simple. So I'll use my transform for the extrusion, and I will move this inwards. Now I'm doing this just to show a slight problem with this geometry. So I'll just escape, and if we look at these polys going around here, let me change to polygon. If we look at these polygons around here, we can see that we've got polygons of different sizes. And this is a problem for me because what if I wanted even polygons on here at this moment? And the reason for this is because of me changing the geometry to form this circle here. So the result of that now is that when I've been creating my geometry on the back of this, then that topology has been inherited all the way through all these extrusions, etc. But there is a way for me to change this. So let's just undo and go back to this here. And what I'm going to do now, this is going to change the geometry here, these edges, and make them all even for me. But unfortunately, what it will do is this edge ring here, let me just highlight this edge ring. This edge ring here will be compromised in order to make these edges even. So you can see here I've got some large gaps here on this edge and some very short ones here. And what this next operation will do will even these out. So I'm just going to undo that last selection and just have this edge loop here selected. I'm going to hit my space bar and I'm going to come down here to where it says equalize edges. What's happened now is it's twisted the edges around, and you can see here that these ones now have been compromised. So now these are twisting and compensating to average out the length of these ones. Now in this particular case, it isn't really going to make much difference having these twisted polygons here. But if it was more of an organic or shape that was going to be animated, this would not be a suitable solution. So if I go back to my transform tool now and I hit commit extrusion, now you can see that all of these edges are now even. So with that done, I'm now going to continue and just extrude a couple more times here. And then I'm going to drop the tool, and then to complete this I'm going to cap this open edge here. So I'll go down to my cap here, choose the cap like so. So I've gone ahead here and I have selected these 3 points on this new geometry. With these 3 selected, I'm going to hit the space bar and bevel. This bevel's far too large, so it needs to be reduced. So I'll use the tools option here to reduce that. I can also use this gizmo here. So I'm going to roughly size them something like that and say OK. Next I'm going to do a couple of changes to this newly formed geometry, this diamond shape that you can see here, to make some circles. The idea here is to show some sort of metal plate or cap on the end of this prop. Let's start down here in the bottom left corner. And I'll choose edges and I'll select the edges of that diamond shape. I'll then hit spacebar and I'll choose cut edges and I'll choose a value of 2. This has selected each edge and split it into 2 edges with this single vertex in the center. With those selected, I'm going to hold down Shift and select these corner pieces to select all these points. Hold down the space bar and then use connect. I'll drop the selection and you'll notice that 3DCoat creates some extra edges inside the diamond shape, which I don't really want. So I'm going to go to delete edges and I'm just going to remove those inner edges. Next, I'll choose select again, and this time I'll go to my vertex tool and select these points. With the points selected, I'll hold down the space bar and choose transform, which will basically put the gizmo in the center of that selection. Now I'll choose the scale and start to scale out those points like so. And you can see now I have that circle shape. However, I don't think this is going to be enough in terms of the geometry. So let's undo that and repeat a couple of steps here. This time, instead of dividing these edges into 2, I'll divide them into 3. So hit the space bar, cut edges, and enter a value of 3 and say OK. Now I'll select those outer points again, space bar and connect. Drop the selection and delete the edges that have been created inside our diamond shape. So now I've got something like this. So now I'll select these points and repeat the same process. Now that's one way to create a circle shape. So let's move over here and do a different method on these other 2. So this next one starts in the same way. We select our 4 edges. We use cut edge with a setting of 3, and we move back to our edge selection here. Just select those other edges. So with them selected, hit the space bar. Now I'm going to choose align verts and faces, and you can see that now I've got this circle, and if I hit apply, it will match those edges to the circle. So with all those points selected, I'll hit spacebar, connect, and now I'll go back with my delete edges and just remove like so. So let's repeat that now for the other. So what we're left with are those 3 even circles with a little bit more geometry in them, which is why we divided those edges into 3 instead of 2, which will help make this look a little bit more like the rivets on the end of our prop. So with that done, I'll use my select polygons and I will select these new shapes that I've just created, transform, and I'll extrude these ones out. So here what I've done is selected this loop around here, as you can see, and you'll notice that the selection stops at the end-gon, the top of those extrusions that we just made, which is useful because now what I'm going to do is just hit the bevel tool here and reduce its size. It's very large, like so, run something like that, and you'll see that those end edges that were selected just before the end-gon have become triangles, which is okay. So I'll now say okay. So now with my selection set to polygons, I'll select those new polygons that we created. And I don't want the triangles to be selected, so I will just Alt click on the triangles themselves. And with this new selection, spacebar, transform, commit extrusion, and now I'll just push these selected polygons down just to give a little bit of extra detail. Drop the selection, escape, and let's zoom in just to see what we've done. We've now got those extra little details on that end, which finishes this part of the model off. So now I will just complete this bottom section down here, and the way that we'll do this is pretty much the same as how we did these on the back. So we'll start off with our select tool, points. We'll select this first point here. Now, depending on how large you want this, if you want to, you can, let's just drop that tool there, and I'll move over to the slide vertex tool here with symmetry on, and I'll just slide these ones out slightly here, just to give myself a bit more room in this area. Probably move it. So these are the 4 polys here that I'm going to be working on. Okay, let's turn off my symmetry here, go back to my select points and select that vertex. And again, as before, now we will bevel that vertex. This time I'll actually increase the size. So now you can see why I've just moved those over to allow that to be a larger face, and say okay. We'll do exactly the same as we did before. Select the 4 edges, cut edges, 3. So here we have this being split into 3 edges now on each of the original edges, and we will just go to our view here just to get it into view, change our selection to edges again, we select all those extra edges that we created, spacebar, align verts and faces. Then we have our circle again. This time I can probably have a little bit of space to make it a little bit bigger, and then say apply. Okay, and there I've created that face now for me to extrude this extra piece out in the middle. Points tool, let's deselect these ones because they all already have a connection, and I'm just going to select these 4 corner points here, connect. Just a little bit of cleanup. Okay, so if we want to extend these out a little bit more, we can again use this vertex slide tool, probably with our symmetry on, and just slide that out if we need to. Okay, so now I will go over to my select face. Let's select this face here, and I'm going to hit my transform tool here. So you can see my gizmo is facing in the wrong direction. It's facing kind of down. I want it to be kind of following this line, extruding that way. So I'll choose my local axis here, commit the extrusion, use the arrow to pull that extrusion out. So I'll commit that extrusion there, scale inwards, commit another extrusion. Now this is a problem that happens if your symmetry is on. So let's just undo that last step there. We'll take the symmetry off and commit that extrusion. And now you can see it's working better. So this needs to come down a little bit further, something like that. Select this face here. And I can just do another extrusion inwards if I want to. Just something like that. And then if I want to just cap this with some, so if I want to cap this region, now I've left that hole in there, then we can simply just use the cap here and fill that with those triangles like so. So one last thing I can do is just bevel these edges down. So let's use my select edges. Use our bevel tool. Shrink that bevel down, it's a little bit large. Say OK. One thing I could do here, if I select this one and use the bevel again on here, just bring this down. I could just change the way that that intersects with there. Maybe it's okay. What we can do on this is if we wanted to, we could take this loop again and we'll do another bevel on here. Make it really small, like that. We'll say OK. So I selected that loop that we've just created, that bevel, and what I can do now is choose that transform tool, commit an extrusion to the local axis there. So now we're going to go back. I just need to move this over just slightly that way, and I'll just move this inwards. It just gives that impression that there's an opening in the handle where this is sticking out of here. So there we have the final base prop. One last thing to do here is this inner section. We can use our transform tool here, push this back further in, and again let's just cap this just to make this solid. So all our main elements are now complete for the prop. All that's left to do now is for us to start adding these details that we can see in here onto our model, and we'll look at that in the next video. See you next time.